Zelinsky, there's a background noise. I don't know if from yours.
Um, I have a microphone on. Does that help? I don't know of any background noise. I
Okay.
can try it this way with the microphone or here without the microphone. Is it better?
Oh yeah, without microphone is much better. Yeah.
With the microphone is better?
Without.
Without. Okay, then we'll do without the microphone. Thanks. Thank you for allowing me the time to present here today. It's a very prestigious group, and today we're going to be discussing the overlooked interaction between the eye and ear processing and its impact on individual health. I want to thank Dr. Babek Kateb for his organizing efforts, Kevin Morris for setting up the online access, Joe Balonis for always being available for questions, and everybody else here for sharing their valuable knowledge. I took Dr. Konstantine's Kotliar's slide, and he just 2 speakers ago was presenting this and then speaking on retinal vessel analysis, and I thought it was a great segue into my speech. He put together all of the costs on these different labels here, and mine starts with how all of these different labels that match his have a common link. All of these regard brain function, blood sugar dysregulation, thyroid dysregulation, speech, language. But when we see patients like this, they're sent to various practitioners. But the common link is that they all link with peripheral retinal processing. And Dr. Kotliar's speech was excellent in how retinal vessels were involved. Here's the retina is a lining of the eyeball, and it actually is an interface between the outside and the inside world. So you have light coming in from the outside, stimulating the retinal activity, but you also have blood vessels that bring in information and stimulate the retina. And there's a feedback and feed forward mechanisms that link with brain function. The retina is an actual overlooked part of the central nervous system. It's part of the brain. It's developed as an offshoot of the neural tube during development. And it has externally 126 million light sensing receptors, which activate various pathways. Some of those, as you can see on the diagram, are visual to register eyesight, and some are non-visual, which are the light sensing receptors combined with internal information, such as jet lag. And internally, there's many pathways to the retina through the bloodstream and the optic nerve coming from the brain further back into the optic nerve. And then you have other feedback and feed forward signals to other portions of the eyeball. So you have the eyelids, the iris, the extraocular muscles, and those are through proprioceptive and motor pathways. So there's a lot happening at the retinal level. When you put eyeglasses on, it affects both the visual and the non-visual information. The visual information relates to central eyesight, identifying a target, peripheral eyesight, dealing with navigation, judgment of speed, location, size, and shape of targets. When you link peripheral eyesight with the inner ear, you get spatial orientation and balance. And then you have internal visualization, like imagery and categorization. Then you have the non-visual part that has different pathways for sleep centers, posture centers. The serotonin levels, there's a huge interaction between the retina and the dorsal raphe. Then you have the geniculo-hypothalamic tract, which is through the intergeniculate leaflet. So the retina on the outside, the light signals go to the intergeniculate leaflet, but then that goes back to the hypothalamus and it's linked with sleep. So when you talk about central and peripheral retinal signals, they have to coordinate. If you watch this red circle doesn't change too much. That's the central eyesight, but the peripheral eyesight does. And if central and peripheral is not linked together, then there is a problem. But even if the central and peripheral eyesight is linked, it doesn't mean that those pathways have teamwork with other systems. So if you have eyesight and hearing and balance separately, that doesn't mean you can sit still while listening and watching. If you have arms and eyes, like most of you do, that doesn't mean you can juggle. And if you have 20/20 eyesight, even with glasses, it doesn't mean you don't need glasses. You may not need glasses to see clearer, but you might need them to feel more comfortable. So today's speech is mostly on eye-ear connections. So the eye-ear coordination develops analogous to the way hand-eye coordination develops. So who has eye-ear disconnects? People that haven't developed fully, or people who had developed but then got them disrupted. And that includes people with brain injuries, neurodegenerative diseases, soldiers with PTSD, school children with learning issues, people with autism, people with mental health disorders. There's research, separate research, that says if you have Parkinson's, you have an eye-ear disconnect. If you have learning issues, you have an eye-ear disconnect. If you have autism, but nobody's testing that eye-ear disconnect. Even though technology has advanced, eye testing hasn't changed very much. For an eye screening, just to see a letter on a chart, Ulysses S. Grant in 1839 had the same screening that they use on kindergartners in the year 2020. And as far as eye testing goes, not just screening, look at the changes in 150 years between a Morse code telegraph and an iPhone, or a Victrola and a player, a music player, or cars. Look what cars have come into. But eye exams have barely changed in 150 years. That top machine was invented in 1905. This is 115 years later, and it's just about the same. And then when you use that piece of equipment and block off somebody's eyes, you're blocking off the periphery. It's 94% of your environment you're blocking off to just see straight ahead, and test 6% to identify a letter on a chart with centralized sight. If you just take children as a subset, even though there's all these other categories, 22% of children with learning disabilities have a visual processing problem, and the trajectory of children's lives can change with funding, and funding can be lessened. So in Illinois, where I'm from, $8,000 a year is spent on special education per child per year. So if you identify 100 children by third grade, you save $4 million. 500 children, you save
2 minutes remaining.
The early screening of eye-ear connections are critical because eye-ear disruptions are important, and they would enhance rehabilitation and quality of life. So we need to expand the current eye testing to include eye-ear integration and allow for these interventions. New CPT codes are needed to keep up with this. It's a non-invasive, cost-effective approach, and these CPT codes exist already, but they're not accepted by eye care professionals. They exist for occupational therapy. So here are some codes that describe what visual assessments that are advanced can do, but insurances currently only accept these codes from occupational therapists. And these are screening codes, and the screening codes currently used are just for visual acuity, just the central 6% that you see, plus screening of photosensitivity. So we need a new CPT code to include eye-ear integration in school screenings. So the takeaway points I have is that the retina is an interface between external and internal signaling systems. Modifying retinal signals affects neuromodulation, which then in turn affects processing of the environment. A screening is needed for early detection of sensory processing issues to mitigate health problems. And Deepak Chopra yesterday said, disruption leads to innovation. So let's use this thought with eye-ear disruption. If we diagnose changes in eye-ear connections early, and we use innovative eyeglasses to alter brain function, join us in the future research that neuroregulation can be done through the retina. Realize that the world is filled with sensory bombardment, and that sensory overload needs to be included in visual examinations. Just like the last speaker spoke on multimodal testing is needed, multisensory testing is needed. And we need to also educate people to have screenings in other practitioners' offices. But I wanted to thank everybody for sharing your time And anybody who has any questions can write to amindeye.com or info@mindeye.com. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Zelinsky, for a wonderful presentation on the eye-ear connection. Now we hand the mic to Dr. Super.